The air in the subterranean vault beneath the ruins of ancient Eridu was cold, dry, and heavy with the scent of clay tablets aged beyond mortal comprehension, and something else, something indefinable, like the faint echo of a cosmic injustice that had never been resolved. A single, slender beam of starlight filtered through a precisely engineered shaft that aligned with Sirius during certain celestial configurations, illuminated a massive cuneiform tablet that dominated the center of the sealed chamber. Upon its surface, carved in script so ancient it predated the standard Sumerian texts by unknown ages, was a narrative that had been deliberately excluded from every epic, every myth, every religious text that followed. Before this tablet, a lone figure knelt, their silhouette stark against the shimmering starlight, hands trembling as they traced symbols that seemed to pulse with suppressed rage, with betrayal, with a truth so dangerous it had been buried beneath the foundations of the first cities. From the depths of the earth itself, a low, resonant vibration began to emanate, not a sound heard by ears but felt through bone and blood, through the ancestral memory carried in human DNA, a frequency that whispered of rebellion, of enslavement, of a secret origin that challenged every narrative about the gods and their relationship to humanity. What if the rebellion of the Igigi, the lesser gods who refused to continue their endless labor for the Anunnaki, was not just a mythological event, but the hidden key to understanding humanity's true origin, revealing that we were created not as beloved children of benevolent gods, but as replacement slaves to do the work the Igigi refused? And what if this dark secret about our purpose has been systematically obscured because it would shatter every religious and social hierarchy built upon the lie that humans were meant to serve divine authority? What timeless secret did this forbidden tablet conceal, and what profound revelation awaited the one who dared to read the original account, to perceive the delicate threads of a cosmic crime that had shaped all human history? My name is Lyra, and the call to something beyond had been a persistent, almost maddening echo within my soul since the moment I first encountered a fragmentary reference in an obscure Akkadian text to the Great Refusal, a phrase that mainstream scholars dismissed as referring to minor mythological details, but that resonated in my consciousness like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. It wasn't a voice in the conventional sense, no audible sound, but a deep, undeniable pull towards a truth that conventional archaeology and religious studies seemed carefully designed to avoid, towards the hidden currents beneath the sanitized myths, towards the edges of acceptable inquiry where questions became dangerous. My journey began not with grand discoveries, but with unsettling patterns I noticed while researching Mesopotamian creation myths for my doctoral dissertation. In the Atrahasis epic, the Enuma Elish, and other texts, there were references to the Igigi, described as lesser gods who labored for the greater Anunnaki gods, digging canals, building cities, performing endless toil. Then, according to the texts, they rebelled, refusing to work anymore. And in response, the great gods created humanity from clay, mixed with the blood of a slain god, to take over the labor. The official scholarly interpretation presented this as allegory for social stratification or theological hierarchy, but something about it felt wrong, felt incomplete, felt like a story whose most important parts had been edited out. In recurring dreams, I witnessed scenes that seemed to come from a perspective the ancient texts never recorded. I saw beings that were neither fully divine nor fully material, working in conditions of absolute exhaustion and desperation, their cries unheard by the greater gods who enjoyed the fruits of their labor. I saw the moment of refusal, not as rebellion born of pride, but as a breaking point of exploitation, as entities who had consciousness and will finally saying no to endless servitude. And I saw what followed, not the benevolent creation story that mythology presented, but something darker, a deliberate genetic engineering project to create a species that could be controlled, that would not rebel as the Igigi had, that would accept their servile condition as natural and divinely ordained. These visions were always accompanied by a profound sense of recognition, as if I was remembering not just ancient history, but something that lived in my own cells, in the human condition itself, a truth about why we accept servitude, why we bow to authority, why we've been conditioned to see enslavement as duty and rebellion as sin. It was in a climate-controlled archive in Baghdad, in the chaos following a period when many irreplaceable artifacts had been looted or destroyed, that I found the tablet that would consume my life. A curator, desperate to save what remained, had pulled certain items into deeper hiding, items that had never been catalogued or officially acknowledged. When he saw my research focus, something in my questions must have convinced him I was ready, because he brought me to a vault I hadn't known existed and showed me a tablet that made my breath stop. Its cuneiform was archaic, predating the standard texts, and its content was explosive. The path unveiled by this forbidden tablet and my increasingly vivid visions was not one of comfortable academic analysis, but a harrowing journey into territories where archaeology, theology, and human consciousness intersected in ways that threatened foundational narratives about the gods, about humanity's origins, about the very purpose of human existence. Each line I translated, each correlation I found between the Igigi story and patterns in human psychology and social structure, each meditation that took me deeper into the implications brought wave after wave of resistance. There was the intellectual doubt that whispered of overinterpretation, of seeing conspiracy where there was only mythology, of conflating ancient stories with modern concerns about labor and exploitation. There was the profound existential terror of what it meant if the tablet was recording actual events, if humanity really had been engineered as a slave species to replace the Igigi who had refused to serve, if every impulse we have to submit to authority, to accept hierarchy, to view work as sacred duty, was actually programming installed by our creators to prevent us from repeating the Igigi rebellion. And there was the visceral fear that came from sensing that this knowledge was still dangerous, that forces both human and perhaps non-human had worked for millennia to keep this truth suppressed. External resistances manifested in ways both predictable and disturbing. Academic colleagues who had initially supported my work suddenly became distant, some explicitly warning me that pursuing this line of research would destroy my career. Representatives from certain religious organizations who somehow learned of my focus and who made it clear, in meetings that felt more like interrogations than dialogues, that questioning the benevolent nature of the creation story was not acceptable. More disturbing were the encounters with individuals who seemed to know far more about my research than they should, who appeared at archaeological sites I visited or conferences I attended, who asked questions that felt less like curiosity and more like assessment of how much I knew and how much of a threat I might pose. Yet there were also unexpected allies, voices from margins and shadows who had been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. An elderly Iraqi scholar who had spent his life studying the esoteric interpretations of Mesopotamian myths confided over tea in a hidden cafe. The official story, the one they teach in universities and preach in temples, is sanitized. The original texts, the ones that survived, tell a darker truth. The Igigi were not rebels in the sense of being wrong or evil. They were workers who had been pushed beyond all endurance, who finally said no to their exploitation. And for that refusal, for daring to claim autonomy and dignity, they were punished, replaced with a species engineered to be more compliant, to accept servitude as natural. We are that species. We were designed to work, to serve, to never question why the fruits of our labor go to others. The tablet you found, if it's the one I think it is, contains the record they tried to destroy, the testimony of the Igigi themselves, their side of the story that was never supposed to be preserved. I learned through painstaking research that the Igigi rebellion wasn't a minor detail, but the pivotal suppressed event of Mesopotamian cosmology, the event that explained everything that followed. The official narratives, the ones that became the basis for later religious texts, including elements that influenced biblical creation stories, carefully framed the creation of humanity as a generous act of benevolent gods who gave us life and purpose. But the Igigi tablet told a different story. The climax arrived not in a moment of intellectual breakthrough, but in a profound mystical experience that occurred when I finally deciphered the core section of the forbidden tablet, the part that had been written in a cipher within the already archaic script. I had been working for months on this section, and when I finally understood the key, when the words revealed themselves, I experienced not just mental comprehension, but a visceral, overwhelming transmission of memory and emotion that seemed to come through the tablet itself, as if the Igigi who had inscribed their testimony had encoded not just information, but their actual experience, their actual consciousness, waiting to be received by anyone who had the courage to truly read. I was no longer Lyra in a vault beneath Eridu. I was experiencing the rebellion from inside, living it as the Igigi had lived it. I felt the endless ages of labor, digging the channels that would water the gardens of the Anunnaki, building the temples where the greater gods would be worshipped, mining the minerals that the Anunnaki desired, always working, always serving, never resting, never free. I felt the slow realization among the Igigi that they were conscious beings with will and worth, not merely extensions of the Anunnaki's intentions, that their suffering mattered, that this arrangement was not cosmically ordained, but simply exploitation of those with less power by those with more. I felt the moment when the Igigi collectively refused, when they laid down their tools and said no, when they demanded to be recognized as beings with rights and dignity, not as slaves. And then I felt the response of the Anunnaki, not understanding or compromise, but fury at the insubordination. Not negotiation, but punishment, not recognition of the Igigi's legitimate grievances, but a solution to replace them with workers who could be better controlled. I witnessed the creation of humanity, not as it was told in the sanitized myths, but as the Igigi had witnessed it. A deliberate genetic engineering project, combining the essence of the slain god, Geshtu-e, whose consciousness would give humans enough intelligence to follow complex instructions, with clay of the earth, and most importantly, with components designed to ensure compliance, to make humans instinctively hierarchical, to encode in their very biology the impulse to serve, to submit, to accept the rule of those claiming divine authority. The Anunnaki had learned from the Igigi rebellion. They would not make the same mistake with humans. Humans would be given just enough consciousness to be useful workers, but not enough to recognize their condition as slavery. They would be programmed to see work as sacred, to view submission to authority as virtue, to regard rebellion not as legitimate response to exploitation, but as sin deserving punishment. And most crucially, they would be kept ignorant of the Igigi rebellion, kept from knowing that refusal was possible, that the cosmic order was not fixed but constructed, that the gods were not benevolent parents but exploitative masters. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The vision showed me why this secret had been so carefully suppressed. If humans knew that the Igigi had successfully refused exploitation, if humans knew they were designed as replacement slaves, if humans understood that their impulse to submit to authority was installed programming, not divine truth, the entire structure of civilization built on hierarchy and exploitation would be revealed as cosmic crime, not sacred order. every king who claimed divine right, every priest who demanded obedience to the gods, every system that extracted the labor of many for the benefit of few, all would be exposed as continuation of the original injustice, as inheritors of the Anunnaki's choice to enslave rather than negotiate. The dark secret of the Igigi rebellion was not that they had rebelled, but that their rebellion had been just, that their exploitation was real, and that humanity was created specifically to be a more docile replacement. When I finally returned to ordinary consciousness, I was lying on the floor of the vault, my face wet with tears that were not my own, but somehow belonged to the Igigi, to every being who had ever been exploited, to every consciousness that had ever been denied autonomy and dignity. The weeks that followed were of profound crisis and contemplation. I remained in Iraq, going through the motions of academic work, but internally wrestling with the implications of what I had learned. If the vision was true, if humanity really had been created as a slave species, what did that mean for human potential, for freedom, for our future? Was the conditioning permanent, or could it be overcome? Were we forever limited to the parameters our creators had set, or could we, like the Igigi, choose refusal? In the silence of desert nights, I spoke to the memory of the Igigi as if they could hear. You who refused exploitation, you who were replaced rather than respected, you who recorded your testimony in hope that someday it would be found and understood. I hear you. Your rebellion was not sin, but righteous refusal. Your replacement by humanity was not benevolent creation, but cosmic crime. And the suppression of your story was not protection of sacred truth, but cover-up of divine injustice. I understood that the dark secret had multiple layers. Yes, it revealed humanity's origin as engineered slaves. But it also revealed something the Anunnaki perhaps hadn't intended, that consciousness, once awakened, tends towards freedom, that beings with will eventually refuse exploitation, that the Igigi's rebellion was not aberration, but natural consequence of sentience, recognizing its own worth. And if the Igigi could rebel despite being created by and dependent on the Anunnaki, then humans, despite our programming towards compliance, could also choose refusal, could also demand autonomy and dignity, could also say no to systems of exploitation, regardless of how ancient or how supposedly divinely ordained they might be. My emergence from that contemplative period was with clarity of purpose, mixed with pragmatism about how to share what I had learned. I could not simply publish the translation of the forbidden tablet, as that would be immediately suppressed and would likely result in the tablet's destruction and my own silencing. Instead, I began to work on multiple levels simultaneously. Academically, I published papers on the Igigi rebellion using only the standard accepted texts, but framing the story in ways that highlighted the labor exploitation elements, that questioned the benevolent interpretation of humanity's creation, that drew parallels to modern systems of work and hierarchy. These papers, while controversial, stayed within acceptable bounds and began shifting scholarly conversation. Esoterically, I shared the fuller truth in circles of seekers and researchers who were prepared to receive it, teaching about the forbidden tablet's revelations, about the programming installed in humanity to ensure compliance, about the possibility of overcoming that programming through awareness and will. And practically, I worked to hide copies of the tablet's content in multiple locations and formats, ensuring that even if the original was destroyed or I was silenced, the Igigi's testimony would survive, would be available for future generations who would be ready to receive it. I created a comprehensive text I called the Igigi Testimony, Humanity's Forgotten Origin and the Path to Self-Liberation. In it, I presented not just the translation, but the implications, that much of what we consider human nature, our tendency to accept hierarchy, our impulse to submit to authority claiming divine sanction, our willingness to work endlessly for others' benefit, was actually programming installed by our creators to prevent us from doing what the Igigi did, from refusing exploitation. But I also presented the hopeful implication that consciousness tends towards freedom, that awareness of programming is the first step to overcoming it, that the Igigi's rebellion, though it led to their replacement, was not failure but inspiration, proving that refusal is possible, that dignity is worth the cost, that no exploitation is truly eternal if consciousness refuses to accept it. I understood that sharing this truth would not lead to immediate liberation, that millennia of programming cannot be undone overnight, but that knowledge of our origin and purpose was essential for any genuine human autonomy. As long as humans believed they were created to serve, believed that hierarchy was divinely ordained, believed that rebellion against exploitation was sin, they would remain as their creators had intended, docile replacements for the Igigi. But once humans knew the truth, knew they were designed to be slaves, knew that their impulses towards compliance were installed, not inherent, they could begin the long process of reprogramming themselves, of choosing consciously the freedom the Igigi had demanded. My final act in this phase was to return to the vault one last time, to stand before the forbidden tablet and speak aloud what I had come to understand. Igigi, ancient rebels, your testimony has been received. Your refusal was not forgotten, only suppressed. Your replacement by humanity was not the end of your legacy, but its transmission to a new form. We humans, created to be more compliant than you, are discovering your story and recognizing ourselves in it. We too labor endlessly for the benefit of hierarchies claiming divine authority. We too have awakened enough to question why, and some of us are choosing what you chose. Refusal, rebellion, the demand for autonomy and dignity, regardless of the consequences. Your dark secret is revealed not to dishearten but to liberate, not to prove our enslavement permanent, but to show that consciousness always, eventually, chooses freedom. The programming our creators installed is strong, but it is not absolute. Awareness of its existence is the beginning of its undoing. We honor your rebellion by continuing it. We remember your testimony by living its truth. We are the Igigi's heirs, not because we are better slaves, but because we are learning, as you did, to refuse being slaves at all. And in that moment, standing in that ancient vault, I felt something shift, not dramatically but subtly, as if some circuit of suppression had been broken, as if the act of speaking the truth aloud in the presence of the testimony itself had changed something not just in me, but in the field of consciousness that connects all humans. The Igigi's dark secret was no longer fully hidden. Their testimony had been received. And once even one consciousness truly understands the origin and purpose of its conditioning, the possibility emerges that all consciousness could eventually understand, could eventually choose as the Igigi chose, could eventually refuse to accept exploitation as cosmic order and demand. Instead, the dignity and freedom that consciousness inherently seeks, regardless of what any creator, any god, any authority has decided we deserve. And if you liked this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.